Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Board Games Unlocked, and today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different, where I'm going to be talking about the top 5 games over the past few years. I have a list of my latest top 10s. I go all the way back to 2016, so 2022 all the way to 2016. And I basically took the games that I put in the top 5, and I've kind of want to do a little experiment really, or a little study on the hotness of the board gaming industry, because as of late I've actually been getting rid of a lot of games, or not buying as many games, mainly because I just don't really feel the desire to go out and buy the latest and greatest, because I mean, you can only buy so many new games and immediately sell them off so many times before you're just kind of like, I just want to play the games that I have. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm still buying games, I'm still backing games and things like that. However, it got me thinking, how many of the top 5, like out of my top 10, how many of like the ones that I deem to be the greatest of that year do I actually still own? And this was something that we could give me a chance to kind of talk about games. At this point, going back to 2016, that's 7 years old, and that's enough time, I think, to kind of think of games that are like relatively older in the hobby. I mean, not as old, but still. Uh, because it's like, if you're saying the game is the best of that year, which I do every year I do a top 10 of the year. If I'm saying that's the best of that year and I'm like raving about it, but then even a year later I don't own it or something like that, then it's like, okay, well, should it have even been considered number one? And I think it goes without saying, if you still own a game that you deem to be number one of a certain year, years later, then I qualify that as a great game. So I don't have the list pulled up. I have it over here on my side computer, but I'm going to be bringing them up on Board Game Geek, um, just so we can kind of look at it and talk about it, and then give you a little bit of my thoughts on it now. So my number 5, we're going to go back to last year, and again, these are the top 5 games that I picked for that year. So in 2022, my number 5 was Burn Cycle. And Burn Cycle, I do still have in my collection, and they actually recently went on Kickstarter for another expansion, just more content. And I have Burn Cycle rated as a 9. Like I said, still own this game. Burn Cycle is a fantastic game by Chip Theory Games, something that completely spins it on its head from their other games that are all about combat. This, you do not want to fight. Let's take a look at some pictures. Yeah, I have those metal mechs too. This one is just a blast. Like, all of Chip Theory's games kind of are puzzly in nature. Like, they're not your traditional combat. This is not your traditional infiltration. I mean, you are going in, but it's really about the puzzle of how you're going to go in and complete the heist. So yeah, I have this at my number 5. So my number 4 game that I put for 2022 is Townsfolk Tussle. So Townsfolk Tussle, I also own. Have this as a 10, and I would still hold that. I actually recently played this game too. This one is like a Cuphead-esque boss battler, and my wife actually painted all the miniatures for it, and they look fantastic. So in the tray, all of my minis are painted, so they look great coming in to go out and do this fight. I just played this as a 4-player game, and it's awesome. If you like Cuphead or anything like that, then I highly recommend this one. They also went on Kickstarter for some expansions and different kind of ways to play just the base game instead of giving it more. And that also could just be why I kept Burn Cycle and Townsfolk Tussle, because they're continued to get support. That may be like a bane or a boon to the industry, but I do feel like a lot of games kind of have to get some support to keep relevancy. So this one got that, and it's still super fun. I mean, to this day, a year later. So that was my number 4. My number 3, I also just played this one the other day. Return to Dark Tower, to Dark Tower. This one is just fantastic. I also have it as a 10. It it's just so good. Like we did it actually with the expansion too. I'd never played the expansion before, and with the guilds, and I mean, the app integration for this is just so inviting. It's extremely atmospheric. Played as a 4-player game, which was a blast. Also took quite some time to actually do because we kept taking a ton of breaks, but I think this one is just phenomenal. I have like no complaints. Um, Except I could say my only minor complaint is that it kind of feels a little bit too easy, but I've also never played it on the harder difficulty, so that could be why. And this is also getting an expansion. I wonder if they have it on here. Yeah, the Covenant expansion, which I have backed for that. So 4 new heroes, more stuff to throw into the game. Yeah, you gotta love it whenever great games get more content. So yeah, this was my number 3, and I also still own this. My number 2 is an ongoing series on my channel, so if you're very interested in this game, then I actually don't recommend you watch this one unless you are actively playing it yourself, and that is Oathsworn. Oathsworn is extremely phenomenal. Now, this is out of my entire top 5 of 2022. This is the only one I think might go away, and it's not for a bad reason. This is a 10 out of 10 game. I like has one of the best combat systems, has one of the best stories, it's one of the best boss battlers out there. Uh, I have like no complaints on this. However, and the reason why I think that this might be one that goes away, I don't know yet, is because these boxes here are mystery. Like this is the mystery chest, so you don't know what you're gonna fight in any given chapter. It's not until you go through the story section then it's like, oh, okay, boom, pull out this to do the encounter section. That's when you find out what you're fighting. And there is just something completely alluring about that it's a phenomenal experience. However, you clearly know what you're fighting if you play it again. So I don't know if it's going to change into now it's more tactile because we know what we're going against, or if it's going to kind of fall away because it's like, oh, you lose the mystery. I don't know yet. But as of right now, I think we're in chapter 8, uh, like out of 20. So it's taken quite some time. Have not had a miss of a chapter yet. It's so good that I can only hope for Shadowborn to come back to it or do another game like this. But yet they've announced they're doing like an area control game with asymmetric power. So I have the utmost faith in them, but I was a little sad to see that their next game isn't going to be anything like this. But that was my number 2, and this could have been my number 1 of last year, but I literally looked at this ranking here, the 9.1, and the one that got number 1, I think at the time had a higher one, so that's how I decided. And my number 1 game, which have very much kept, is Aeon Trespass Odyssey. So has a 9.2, so it's still higher. I think it had a 9.3 at one point, and then the shit with Quackalope and all that kind of brought it down, but then they made more money on their Kickstarter. Yeah, this one, I budgeted to get literally everything for this game. Dropped a pretty penny to get everything for it, but they just had so much content on their latest Kickstarter that it's insane. This has now become my lifestyle game, not including, any type of maybe 1v1 fighter game or something, but like in terms of a role-playing game, is this one clearly. I also have a 10. Funny enough, though, the top 5, Burn Cycle was a 9, and the rest were all 10, so that's actually pretty consistent on my end. But this is kind of like your better version of Kingdom Death Monster. It's clearly inspired by that, but in my opinion does it better just because it just has more to it. I also like the theme a lot with the sci-fi kind of Greek pantheon, primordial kind of theme that's going on. Uh, This one was a series on my channel. I have since paused it because I just had too many series going on, so I kind of wanted to finish the ones I was doing with other people. Like I was doing this with Devin, and I'm currently doing Madara with Devin, so it's like it was just too much. Like we were not remembering rules, hopping back and forth. But yeah, Alien Trespass Odyssey was my number one game of 2022, and I still have. So looking back to 2022, I still have every game that I put in my top five. So that goes to show that's a pretty good year for 2022. So now let's go and look at 2021. So going back 2 years now. And the number five game that I have for 2021 is Descent Legends of the Dark. This one is technically still an ongoing series on my channel, although it's been quite some time since I've played it. This one got a lot of flack for whenever it came out, but I think this is easily the best Descent that's out there. I love the website integration for it. I love the 3D terrain aspect. It just really brings in a tactile nature or just some element of theme into this game. The fact that the website kind of manages all the micro calculations for percentiles and all that is something that hasn't been done in any game, any board game so far. And I'm intrigued in the story. They gave enough characterization to the characters. I mean they're not like deep or anything, but they're still there. Like they don't feel like extremely flat, but they're not like super amazing. Uh, so yeah, and this one is actually they've announced Act 2, so I'm excited for that. I will be pre-ordering at that. I don't know how many acts if they said how many acts they're gonna do. Uh, but it does seem to be a continuing story. So I do still have this. I have no plans on getting rid of it, even whenever I do beat it. Um, but only time will tell. I think this could just be one that I keep on the shelf until years later when I want to replay the campaign. So that was my number five of 2021. Number four, this one's interesting because I have not played this in quite some time, and that is Unfathomable. If I knew how to spell. This is saying 2021. It's not. Oh, yes, it is. It's 2021. I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah, so Unfathomable, have it as a 9. This was Fantasy Flight's replacement for Battlestar Galactica because they no longer had the rights to do so. It is essentially that game, so this is just modern. Now, I'm actually surprised that they haven't announced an expansion for it because Battlestar had like 3 big box expansions. You would think that they'd at least announce one for this one, but as with Fantasy Flight, they don't really do expansions for their board games. They just tend to do a bunch of expansions for their LCGs. Um, so yeah, I do still own this. I just haven't played it in quite some time. You have to have kind of a large group. I might actually bring this with me to Gen Con and play it there because that would be a lot of fun. So yeah, this one I think is still great if you like the hidden trader aspect and you like Lovecraft. This does a really great job of implementing the Battlestar Galactica theme. I like this more, but that's because I'm not a Battlestar fan. So I've barely watched the show, so I can't even say I dislike. I liked what I watched, but I didn't keep up with it. So still have this one in my collection. Then we go on to another game that is getting continued support and a game that I am actively playing, and that is Final Girl. So Final Girl actually just got a season 2, which added a whole nother set of monsters and locations. And they just announced in September they're going on Kickstarter for their season 3. So clearly they have been supporting this. This game is a phenomenal solo game where you play as a final girl in a horror movie. I've actually done for this a ranking of all the monsters and locations. So, kind of which ones were my favorite out of season 1. Currently going through season 2, so I'll be doing another video on season 2 as well. for the rankings of the killers and the locations. Um, but yeah, this one I still have. They did it. They organized it in a way. I wonder if this is showing it. Not really. I wonder if Final Girl season or series. I guess it's not series 2. Maybe bonus. No, that's not going to be it. Well, maybe. Yeah, they do have it. All right, cool. Yeah, so this is the series 2 box, but yeah, so you kind of have it looks like a VHS set with the uh actual like as if they're VHS tapes um all organized into one. So I think this is just a really cool. They nailed the aesthetic of this series. So yeah, Final Girl is amazing and I still have it. And that was my number 3. Now we come to my first game that I do not own, and I have gotten rid of it since then. And that, it makes me so sad. Like it bums me out so hard that I had to get rid of this. I didn't have to, um, but I chose to get rid of it because it started to become really, really bad, and that is Bloodborne. So Bloodborne uh, is previously owned. I have since dropped it to a 6. I wish I'd actually told you if you like if you made changes, but that would be kind of whatever. I think I had it as an 8 or a 9. This one started off so strong, and once you got into the little boxes that they had, because they had big boxes, uh, and the big boxes were great. Like the scenarios in the core set was really good. Kanehurst Castle was really good. The Forbidden Woods was also really good. And then you got into these small ones, the Arhagul, Bergenworth. Um, what was the one that the Upper Cathedral Ward? They just tanked so hard. They just seemed like they didn't put as much effort into it, and those are major areas of the game that are important with good boss fights. But it's just it fell so flat. It started to become. I literally had a scenario where it was unwinnable just due to the random nature of the game. And so it was clearly obvious that for the small boxes, they did not put as much design effort into it. Uh, and you just play all those little boxes at the very end. So it just kind of becomes one of those uh, things where you're like, well, do I never play these again? But you can't really go through the whole Bloodborne video game without going to them, and they just are not worth it. So yeah, so this was my number 2 of 2021, and I no longer own it because it was just not fun to play. But great system otherwise with their combat. I actually liked the way they did the trick weapons with the slight deck building. Now the deck building did get kind of repetitive, and luckily this did not taint my feelings of the video game in the slightest. So yeah, that one I got rid of. And my number 1 for 2021, which is still currently my favorite game of all time, and that is Sleeping Gods. So I got rid of it. No. Yeah, 10 out of 10. Sleeping Gods is a masterful design of storytelling and open world sandbox board gaming. Like, when other games say that it's a sandbox, it's like, are you sure about that? Are you sure about like because it's like, well, it's a sandbox in theory, but Sleeping Gods is the one where it's just kind of like, okay, here's the tutorial, here's where you start. Here's your opening quests. You can choose to go do those, but you don't have to. I love that aspect. I also love the way the combat works. The combat is very puzzly in nature on how you're dealing damage, what you're gonna, focus on enemy wise, and how you're gonna defend against the attack, who's gonna take damage, how you're gonna heal. Oops. Oopsie. Hit the thing. So, yeah, this one's still a 10 out of 10, and also getting a sequel, The Sleeping Gods Distant Skies, which made me super happy. And they now have foreteller narration, so that also takes the load off of trying to, of having to read everything. But this theme, the open world nature, the quests, the gameplay, I love everything about it, so I'm very excited to see what the sequel does. And that was my number one game for 2021. So right now, out of 10 games, I have gotten rid of one. So that's really really good. 9 games I still have in my collection, and uh, and I'm very curious how it's going to go from here on out. So now we go back down to 2020. So 2020, my number 5 game is Lost Ruins of Arnac, which has since gotten an expansion and has announced another expansion. This should be coming out very, very soon. This is kind of like around the same time as Dune Imperium, and everyone compares the two, and it's like, who gives a shit? Just play the game you want to fucking play. Uh, this one is the one I chose. I really like this. The element of deck building and worker placement, I think works very well here. The expansion was much needed of just giving more content and player powers. I think that's a very safe but good opening expansion. Then you go into like just the way that like, oh, it also gave different research tracks, different ways to go up these tracks, and then more cards of artifact cards and I can't remember, expedition cards, I guess, like your regular cards. Yeah, this one I enjoy a lot. I have it as a 9 out of 10 and still own. So that is my number 5. My number 4, I haven't actually played in in a little bit, and I keep meaning to because I have a friend who wants to see it, and they announced an expansion that I should get played, and that is Tawantinsuyu. Really hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But I have this one as a 10 out of 10. I very much enjoy this. I think this is the lowest. Like, not everyone gravitated towards this. I'm kind of shocked because, yeah, obviously Teotihuacan uh, is their like magnum opus of the T series. Then there was Tekhenu, which I played the expansion for that one, didn't really care for it, but then it made me kind of like the base game a little bit more. But this one I just really like. I like how the different meeples have different colors. I like the aggression of resources depending on how you're going to go around the track. I like how the placement of your meeple on the action spots matters. There was just a lot that went into this that I enjoyed, and this is one of the best player aids I've seen in any board game. This game seems complex, but then you have your player aid and you're like, actually, it's not that bad. So I like this a lot. I still need to try the expansion, and I hope that that's just as good. But yeah, so right now, my number 4 for 2020 was Tawantin Suyu. And then we get to my number 3 of 2020, which I also do not own anymore, and that is Etherfields, or Etherfields. Yeah, put it to a 4. This one got so tedious. Oh my god, did it just get so frustrating to just play. Now, this ranking here that I have on it is mainly is before they did their fixes. So I had sold and got rid of the game before they made their announcement of how to change the game. But they also made the announcement kind of in a dickish way, like, yeah, if you just want to play poorly, play with these changes. It's like, no, you just designed a bad game. Um, at least on all the stuff outside of the dreams, because the dreams were cool, but the problem was you had to just deal with all the monotony of the in-between stages that they basically gutted, like, for all intents and purposes, because I did look at the rules, but it wasn't enough for me to buy back everything for this. I mean, in terms of atmosphere and theme, this game nails it. It's so cool. The dreams were awesome that you went through. There was something about the like that. It's like, man, what's going on? Like there was a mystery surrounding the overarching story, the deck building that they have. This game had a lot going for it. I just got very tired of dealing with everything until I got to the next dream that it just wasn't worth the effort. So I no longer own this one. This 4 would probably maybe go up to a 5, even potentially a 6, had I played it with the new updated rules. But alas, I do not, so that's where I'm sitting it. So that was my number 3 of 2020. Then we go to my number 2, another game I have played recently, uh, and recently in the board game industry is like a few months back, and that is Reichbusters. Before Mythic Games decided to shit in everyone's mouths, uh, they have I have Reichbusters. I'm actually gonna bump this up to a sweet old 9 since I have recently played it. This one, it's kind of like if you really enjoy Wolfenstein, but you don't want to buy the board game Wolfenstein or replay the video games. This one kind of gives you that same feeling. This looks like a map, like one of the epic maps you can do, and there's a lot going on in this game. It's the reason why it's not a 10 is because it can be a little fiddly to actually set up. Um, But other than that, I know that Mythic Games actually did do an update pack, so all their typos and things were corrected. But every character has their own unique deck and play style. Whenever you set it up for a massive, like a massive mission like this one, then you have just a ton of objectives you have to do for the entire thing. They actually implement like a noise element. So whenever you are like, if you run past a room and there are enemies, they become alerted and then they start kind of moving towards you. You can sneak into rooms and like try and silently kill. Like I've had plays of cards where I went into a room of Nazis with a character that was all about like close-up combat with daggers and just assassinated all of them. You can do stuff like that. You can go in guns blazing, and then the noise is just insane, and then it alerts everyone, and they all start running towards you, and you start throwing grenades. This game is completely action-packed and tons of fun, so I have a blast with this whenever I do play it, and yeah, it's just a shame that this is, I mean, it took 3 years for Mythic Games to kind of slowly start tanking. I highly suspect that they will not be. I don't think they'll be a company in a couple of years. Like, I think they have a lot of games on Kickstarter that are not, that I think you have. They still did that shady shit with Darkest Dungeon, Rising Six, Rainbow Six Siege. They did it to where you had to pay, and if you didn't pay, then you weren't getting your game. Then they have Hell, is another game that they have going on. They have a bunch that are just on back order pretty much, and I highly doubt they'll get delivered. But Rockbusters I have, and it's really really fun. It's just a fun guns blazing kind of game. So that was my number 2 of 2020, and my number 1, which is just fantastic that I made a shadow box for it, is Pandemic Legacy Season 0. This was, I haven't replayed this one. I actually kind of want to. Like currently, I'm slowly going through season 1 and 2 with a buddy of mine, and then we'll go to 0. This was set during the Cold War. It's a prequel really to season 1 and 2. So I still say play them in the order they came out. But you can play it as 0, 1, and 2. This one is, in my opinion, the best one out of the 3. I think they did a wonderful job of flipping this game on its head instead of just kind of copying the Pandemic formula. It's still there, but it is dripping with theme, like the different ways that you interact with the different months and kind of how you go through the entire campaign is just, I'm trying to not spoil anything, but yeah, highly, if you like any if you like Pandemic and you haven't tried the Pandemic Legacies, you're missing out. These are some of the best gaming experiences you can get. So still, technically I don't have this one anymore, but that's because I finished it. But I do kind of still have it because I actually made a massive shadow box for it, and I'm very proud of that. So that was my number 1 game for 2020. This is actually kind of crazy. This is going Going down memory lane. It's already been 3 years. 3 fucking years since this game came out. God. Well, let's go even further back. Let's go back to 2019. 2019, my number 5 game, which I haven't played in quite some time, even though I keep trying to get it played, is Detective City of Angels. So I have this one as a 9 out of 10. This is a whodunit style game, like Sherlock Holmes or Chronicles of Crime, but it does this one in a completely different way than the rest of them. This is actually one versus many. One person plays what's known as the Chisel, and they are basically the DM. They know the case, they know the ins and outs, and they are trying to actively throw the players off the the trail. Man, why do I keep doing that? I'm so fucking stupid. Here we go. Uh, to try and get them to lose, to run out of time. But the players have ways that they force the chisel's hand. So a good example is like you can have a player goes to interrogate a gangster, and you as the DM, you could either just read a card, but I would say if you're going to be the DM, you should make it theatrical and just be like, "Oh man, I didn't see what happened to old little dead John," and then it's like, "Now get the fuck out of my face," and it's like, hmm, does he really not know? And then and then because these are beat cops, these are guys that are like, I mean, it's 1940s, so the player can either take you at your word and be like, okay, yeah, he must not know anything, or he could rough him up, be like, you know what, you do know what happened. I know you were there that night, and then like kind of use one of their tokens to force. And if it was the truth, then the chisel has a leg up on the player. But if it was a lie, then the player has a leg up on the chisel, and so you can kind of force people to tell the truth later on. It's fantastic. They have so much content for this. I think they just are going to do another expansion. So, yeah, the Saints and Sinners expansion is what they're doing. So they've Van Ryder Games has been supporting this quite a bit, and it's awesome. I haven't even like I still haven't done like they've done like 2 of the base games. So I have a lot of cases. So that was my number 5 of 2019. My number 4, which I also still have, and I'm currently waiting on the expansion for this one, is Sorcerer. Now Sorcerer is an awesome 1v1 game. Ignore the 2 to 4. It is a 2-player game, kind of like Smash Up a little bit in that you're fighting for bases, but you take 3 different decks and you shuffle them together, and that just allows for a ton of replayability. And something that I enjoy is just any game where you can just modular decks together is some of my favorites. But the one thing about this game that kind of I'd be curious to see if I would have ranked Sorcerer at number 4 now, um, because the combat is complete luck. It's basically rolling dice. It would have been nice if it was a little bit more like Magic, where you can kind of you tap them to do just attacks, but you roll dice, and it can kind of take the wind out of your sails. But other than that, the gameplay is awesome. The deck building portion is crazy. The different combos that you can get from the 3 different decks. You pick a sorcerer, a lineage, and a domain, and there's a lot for that. And I'm waiting on the expansion for it, the Sorcerer Endbringer expansion that adds way more heroes and cards and makes it fully cooperative, and you fight bosses. It'll be here sometime. But anyway, that was my number 4 of 2019. Then we go to my number 3, which I also no longer own, but still really like this game, and that is On Mars. Oh, that says 2020. I must have played it in 2019. This might have been one of those that came on the cusp, but I have it at 2019, so that's what I'm gonna go with. Yeah, so this is a Vita Lasarda game, game that I have ranked as an 8, but I no longer own it. I actually don't own any Vita Lasarda games anymore, even though I used to own all of them. And that is mainly due to kind of a change of preference. I'm not always wanting to play or teach this heavy of a Euro anymore. Like, I still like heavier Euros, but kind of like I'm in the Mind Clash kind of element, which I think are slightly like a level under this. Like if Vito's games are at the very top, I put Mind Clash at a step underneath, and then I would put Garfield games underneath that. And the Mind Clash Garfield uh, genres where I'm really at for Euros, because there's so much going on. I respect the hell out of these games. I think they're masterpiece in designs. I just don't always want to break them out. And I say that as there is currently a Kickstarter that just went, I think it just completed for his next game. And I'm waffling on the idea of picking that up just to play it and picking up some of the other ones. I don't know. I say that, but I also really would like to have these games back in my collection because they are just quality wise, they're great and they are really good. I think only the one lately that I didn't really care for was Weather Machine. I like it theme, but I don't actually like the gameplay all that much or the gameplay loop, but the rest are phenomenal. So, yeah, that was my number 3 on Mars. My number 2 I do own, and that is Black Rose Wars. And this is actually coming out with another expansion or something called Black Rose Wars Rebirth, which I don't know if it's standalone. I think it's standalone, but it just comes with much more content. So this is the game that I tell people when people are. I think there was a Reddit page that was like, "Hey, what should I get if I want to, like fighting wizards or something?" And I'm like, "Okay, if you want something wacky and beer and pretzels, get Wiz War. If you want an actually serious game, get Black Rose Wars." Uh, Ludus Magnus Studio, they don't do a whole lot, and I typically stay away from kind of their other games because they're a mess of a designer or a publishing team. Uh, Almost I would akin them to a little bit like Mythic Games, where it's like you might get typos, you're probably gonna get an update pack later on, but Black Rose Wars has just so much content. The amount of of events and characters, and the characters have special abilities, and the schools of magic. Oh my God, there's so much, and there's gonna be so many more. I actually played this recently as a 3-player game, and it went very well. I was surprised that as a 3-player game, it wasn't like all that bad because I mean, just the nature of they do that adrenaline thing where it's like, yeah, you're trying to kill each other, but whoever deals the most damage when a wizard dies gets the point. But then they come back and they're at full health, and it's kind of like, well, okay, it's going to take some time to deal damage to you, so I'm going to go target the other person. Uh, I love the way this game is set up for how you cast spells, the programming element, the thinking what your opponents might do, the hopefully you get some combos going off with your spells. It's just so awesome, and the way that every single school plays completely different is amazing. So still have this as a 9. I'm gonna keep it as a 9, even though I have played this like a few months back, um, just because it was kind of a headache to set up. Like finding, it's like, oh, I took this spell and it requires one miniature. It's like, oh God, where is the miniature? So just small things like that with no adequate storage solution kind of is a little frustrating. Other than that, like here's what that's a pretty accurate board. Yeah, it's awesome. So that was my number 2 of 2019. And my number 1, which I still have everything for, is Tainted Grail. So Tainted Grail is, I think, Awaken Realm's best game. This is a theme that is right up my alley as a Dark Souls-esque King Arthurian legend that's just so cool. Actually getting a video game, and I played the demo for the video game, and I was pretty impressed. Like, I mean, it's if you liked Oblivion from Bethesda, that's kind of what it reminded me of. So it's very dated as a video game, but just the fact that if it's coming from a board game designing team, it was pretty solid. But they've also announced they have a ton of expansions, like massive big box, like the Fall of Avalon or the Red Death expansion, Age of Legends last night, and then their newest one, Tainted Grail. What is it called? Not Tainted Grails. Kings of Ruin. Yeah, the Kings of Ruin expansion, standalone story behind Tainted Grail. So they've been supporting this game uh, since its release in 2019, and I still have yet to beat it. So like that's just how much content there is, and still one of the best writing in a board game that we've seen. Like I don't know who, I can't remember who their writer was, but they are knocking it out of the park. They could write novels, honestly, with how good their writing is. So that was my number one of 2019, keeping it as a 10 as well, even though a lot of people didn't like the upkeep for the menhirs, and I feel like that's more of an issue as a solo person. Like and I did play this solo. It is a little bit to kind of you have to go back and keep the beacons up. But I think there's a couple ways to fix that. One, if you find another player, that alleviates the burden of having to keep certain menhirs alive. Two, actually, there's a third one you could realistically do. The second one is if you can really get into the theme, then it actually kind of makes it a little bit more if you're like, oh my god, we have to keep these beacons alive, otherwise we all die, like that. Or third one, just don't deal with it. It's a board game. Like just be like, oh, anyway, those are alive forever. If it's that big of an issue, then just don't deal with it. So yeah, that was my number one for 2019. Then we go to 2018. 2018, my number five was a game I also played recently, and that is Street Masters. So Street Masters is done by essentially a design team and publishing company that is kind of not around anymore. Blacklist Games, I think the Sadler brothers or whoever decided to, I think, close doors. The Sadler brothers, I thought, stepped away from designing, but there is a game that was announced that actually has them as the designers, so that was pretty intriguing. But Street Masters, I think, is one of their best games in their modular deck system series. This is, I mean, take Street Fighter and it's kind of that, but in a 3D element. I did just play this recently of just picking random fighter and location, and it's just so much fun. The depth of the villains or the gang you're fighting against, the fact that the location does something different, and your character doing something different, all comes together extremely well. This system, the MDS system, seemed to kind of this game. It works well in Brook City, and it works pretty well in Alter Quest, but this one you can just tell is like their magnum opus of all their games, I think, with a 9 out of 10. So that was number five. Number four, here we go. Here, okay, the other game in the T series, Teotihuacan. So, yes, okay. 2018, Teotihuacan. How is this a 7.9? That's a lie. This is a 10 out of 10, and all the expansions for it, except the Shadows of Zidal, are phenomenal. It is called the Shadows of Zidal, right? Yes, I was correct. The expansion period and the pre-classic period are two exquisite expansions for this game. But whenever I was talking about Tawantinsuyu, I think Teotihuacan is their... Was this one? Hold on. Tawan. This is 7.9. 7.5. Okay. And then Tekhenu. Tekhenu has a 7.7. Oh, that's funny. 7.5, 7.7, and 7.9. Interesting. But Teotihuacan actually it got a deluxe edition, which I did back. They had a nice just upgrade pack because I have everything for it. worker placement, dice worker placement game. You're working to build the tower, even though in every single game of this I have played, I have never seen that tower completed. I had one game where a buddy of mine, that was his entire focus, and he didn't get far. So I think it's probably one of those elements of the game that multiple people have to kind of go in on. It's not like a game breaking thing, like if you don't touch it, you're not going to win or something like that. I love the dice worker placement of this. Love the expansions. They added so much modularity to it that there's a lot of different ways to play it. It's extremely good. I also have it as a 10 out of 10. What did I have Tech Henu at? An 8. Okay. Yep, that's about right. I'll keep Teotihuacan and To Want to See You as 10s. So that was my number 4. Then we are on to my number 3 again of 2018. Remember, this is 5 years ago. Wow. And that is Deep Madness. Deep Madness is basically a lot of sci-fi horror games meshed into one. You have, I mean, it's Lovecraftian inspired, of course. Then you have Dead Space, but underwater. You have aliens. You have a little bit of Half-Life in here also, just as your horror dungeon crawl game where it has like a flood system that rooms flood, and then when you're going in there and doing actions, you have an oxygen meter on top of horrific monsters that are just coming at you with different effects and different abilities, as well as different items you're going to get while you're getting. Um, there are madness cards you can get that just some of them are really like visceral that just kind of pull you into this theme. I love the theme for this game, and they actually did do a storage box, which was nice, like one for all the minis and one for the rest of the stuff. So hell, as long as there's a way to organize it, I don't care, because the previous one is just bags upon bags that I just can't do anymore, or just don't want to. But they went on for an expansion, but who knows where. This game took a little bit to come out. Also, I know they did a sequel, Dawn of Madness, people are still waiting on, but this company, at least Dimension Games, still goes to. They still went to Gen Con last year and showcased it. They're like, hey, we are working on it. It's just. So here it is. And I'm like, well, I mean, I'll take that. I'll take that over nothing. So Deep Madness, I think, is one of the best dungeon crawlers that I have, and that's why it was my number 3. My number 2 for 2018, still getting content, still beloved, and that is Root. Root is an asymmetric war game where every faction plays completely different, and they have continued to support this up until last year. First expansion, what was the first expansion that came out? Yeah, the Riverfolk expansion in 2018. Then it was the Underlings. Okay, so the Riverfolk expansion they have is the same year it came out. Then Underworld expansion came out 2 years later, and then the Marauder expansion came out 2 years later. It's very interesting to see kind of that, because you don't think of it. You think of like, oh man, they all came out around the same time or year after year, but no, a 2 year gap. So from what I've talked to Patrick Leader, I talked to him at Gen Con last year asking if he planned on doing more expansions, and he said yes, and then eventually they'll do a storage solution, so that's exciting. Root is one of my absolute favorite games in asymmetry, but it also doesn't get played a whole lot because it's kind of one of those. It's difficult to teach because every faction plays different. So it's up to the most experienced player to teach everyone who hasn't played. So the experienced player has to have played or at least seen played all the other factions. And because it's competitive, it's just kind of weird to still try and play and then help another player. So it's almost easier to just kind of sit out. But then, if you're just teaching them and they're trying to learn, then they might not do well. So it's just like this is a game that I want to play with people who are like aggressive war players and big on negotiation and tactics and and striving to win, and have also played the game. So it doesn't hit the table all that much, but when it does, God, it's so good. So that was my number two, and then my number one of 2018 is Rising Sun, or was Rising Sun. Wow, that actually went down quite a bit. 7.8. What is Blood Rage nowadays? So Rising Sun, the second in the Eric Lang series. Blood Rage is a 7.9, and Ankh. Okay, I was like, no way. 7.8. Wow. Huh. Maybe just people. I think. You know what? You know what it is? I think for all three of those, it's an Eric Lang or it's a Simon thing. People just are like, oh, Simon won. It's just like, oh man, that's enlightening. Um, Rising Sun is my favorite out of the three. I love the feudal Japan setting. I think the way that the negotiation aspect of this game works, the action selection is awesome. The way that the honor system and the different alien faction abilities integrate with your cards that you get throughout the game. I love the fact that you know where areas are going to battle, but it's not going to be every faction or every section of the map. I still hold on to the game a couple years back when I played a six-player game of this that after I got done explaining, because not everyone had played, after I got done, it was like, okay, yeah, let's start. So we get to the negotiation phase, and everyone just hopped onto that. They're like, okay, hey, you come with me, and they all started texting each other, like coming up with different plans. It's exactly what this game and games like it should be, where people are just like, okay, here's what I'm gonna do. Because there was a point in the game where in the second phase in this like second season when it came to another negotiation, a friend of mine, he had a ton of money, and he was like, I'll give you 10 gold to break your alliance with him, and I was like, deal. It was like no thought, because 10 money is a lot because you need money to be able to do combat. And yeah, it was just like, and then the guy, one of my friends, he was like, "Oh, okay," and like allied with someone else. Um, so yeah, that's Rising Sun. Still a 10 out of 10. Love it to death. It's so good. And that was my number one of 2018. Two more years to talk about. My number five, then 2017, we're getting into some great games. So right now, out of we have one, two, three, four, five. So out of 25 games, I no longer have um one, two, three. I no longer have three games. I guess I should have said all for 2018. I have all those games. I have Street Masters, Teotihuacan, Deep Madness, Root, and Rising Sun. Um, so yeah, 25 games. I no longer have three of them. So now let's go into 2017, where my number five that I guess technically Pandemic Legacy Season 0, I also don't have, so we'll say four. But for my number five, well, no, I technically own it, and that is Pandemic Legacy Season 2. Season 2, I have an 8 out of 10. I actually do own this. It is new in shrink because I haven't got to it yet when I'm replaying it. But this, a lot of people consider this to be the weakest one in the series. I still think it's exceptional because it flipped Pandemic on its head. This one plays almost nothing like even 0 or 1. So it's very cool with how they went about this, and I commend them for going in a different direction, um, and being a really good sequel to the season one. So so yeah, like I think this is funny. Little smiley face on that. But also without any spoilers, like the only thing I can kind of tell you is that yeah, they did do something different from season one to season two, but I think that what they did different still works very, very well. I do own this. And I think the plan, because I kind of wanted to do a shadow box for season 1 and season 2, but I have no idea where I'd put them. Uh, but yeah, do own this, but I also wouldn't have owned it if I wasn't going to go redo them. So that was my number 5. My number 4 of 2017 I also still own, and I have the Infinity box for it, and that is Anachrony. 9 out of 10. My favorite game from Mind Clash. This game is about time travel, prepping for a meteor strike to be whoever's the most influential at the end becomes the new government of the new world or whatever. But does a small time travel element in this that I think works extremely well. Engine building, worker placement in a heavy Mind Clash game style. This is your base with the 3D mechs, which I also have. The little worker things, like these guys slot into them when you send them out into the world to go get you resources and stuff. And then this is like where you can put in specific buildings into your base. But yeah, have this. They supported this extremely well with a ton of expansions, just multiple different ways to play the game, modules, and it's like this doomsday pack of just instead of just trying to like prep for a meteor, like you have like a major goal you have to complete before you can leave. Uh, there's just other elements you can do to win the game instead, and then I have the big storage box for it. So, but haven't touched it in quite some time. Not since I organized everything. Uh, so yeah, that was my number 4 of 2017, Anachrony. My number 3, I also still own, and that is This War of Mine. This War of Mine, one of the very first Kickstarters that I backed, and boy, it's just so crazy to think about because you just whenever you start backing games on Kickstarter, it can be kind of confusing if you're trying to get everything for it and you don't really know how the intricacies of the pledges work. And I think companies got a lot better with their pledges since then to make sure it's kind of easier to understand of what's happening. But this War of Mine is a survival game based off the video game that you play as civilians in a war-torn city in this building trying to survive all the shit that just goes on with that. Uh, Coming up with ideas to build in like a furnace or even a bed that will help you survive day after day, sending people out to locations to gather resources that you need for either the ideas or just straight up food and water. This game is, I don't play this all the time. I don't play this by myself either. I can see why people are saying it's best at one. I think just the story element, like because they have the book of scripts in it that back then you just didn't really see. But it was like interactions, kind of like a Tales of Arabian Nights thing where you go somewhere and then you might run into a thing that will tell you to read from the storybook. They also have expansions for this one that add like just different elements of the game, like orphans or farmers, just small modular things, and then other modes to play. Yeah, this one is great. Yeah, keeping it as a 9 out of 10. So that was my number 3. My number 2 of 2017. Funny enough, I just got the newest expansion in as I'm recording this, and very excited to jump into it, and that is Spirit Island. So Spirit Island is it might be my favorite cooperative game. Like I'm pretty sure if it's not my favorite, I guess Sleeping Gods is my favorite game, but that's for a bunch of different reasons. If I'm looking at pure cooperation, Spirit Island just is so good. Just because everyone plays a spirit that is completely different from the rest of the that's interesting from the rest of the table. Like these two spirits play so different just from their special powers and their special and the way that they do their main actions and they level up is different from game to game, as well as the um, card powers that you get for them, that you're going to be interacting with the board differently than what others do. So you need to rely on other players. Um, you can't, like, this game just doesn't allow for quarterbacking because you're too busy trying to figure out what you can do, that you need others to be able to work with you on your stuff. Like, a good example I always give is there's an alien. The spirit that I pulled up the first time, well, now it's gone. I don't know why that one went away. But the lightning bird, she's one of the starting spirits, and some of her things are allowing other alien card powers. I keep saying alien. Spirit card powers to go fast, because your powers can either be fast or slow, which means fast means they go before the invader's turn, slow means they go after. So just that alone, allowing typically the earth spirit, allowing them to go faster could be huge in trying to stop the invaders from doing what they're going to do. It's so good. It's a very, very difficult game, and they've supported it a bunch since then. Like, Nature Incarnate is the newest one I just got, but they had Feather and Flame, which was last year. Jagged Earth came out in 2020. I think that's, and then Branching Claw came out the same year, huh? Another expansion came out the same year, like Root. So Branching Claw 2017, then yeah, Jagged Earth in 2020. So 3 years later, Jesus Christ. You know what it is? I think it's these expansions went on like GameFound, not GameFound. That was more recent. Went on Kickstarter or something like the year before. So maybe that's why it feels later than it might have been initially. Then 2022 and then 2023. Yeah, I love everything about this game, except it can be a little fiddly to set up. So I like if you're trying to incorporate other expansions, it's not as intuitive on. Uh, there's not like a universal rule book, which would have been nice. But yeah, I mean, other people love it too. It's at 11 overall. That's impressive. So that was my number two of 2017. This was, wow, wow, 2017. This was 6 years ago. And as to no one's surprise, 2017, my number one is Gloomhaven. Still one of my favorite games of all time. I have Gloomhaven at a 10. It, I mean, back then, like, it was no surprise that this shot to number one. I still have this. I am going to get the second edition because everything that they did in Frosthaven is superior. So whenever all the changes they're going to make for second edition is just going to make it that much better. I've beaten this in person. Took me 5 years to do it, so that was pretty shocking to realize that it'd take me 5 years to beat this by myself. I have beaten it on Steam as well, so that did not take 5 years. That took a significantly less amount of time. God, what's to say about Gloomhaven that hasn't already been said? It's just a masterpiece in design, and the price point for it was just insane. Love the characters, love how they're all different, love the card play, love the dungeon crawl. Cannot wait to see the changes done for second edition. And Frosthaven is this, but better. So yeah, this was my number one for 2017. So again, 2017, have every single game for that year that was in the top five again. And the last year we're going to talk about is 2016. So 2016, my number five was, God, it's just amazing this came out this long ago, is Great Western Trail. Now this is the gross cover version. This is the clip art, 90s computer graphics cover that just looks like ass. I technically do not own this version, so we'll look at the better one when I talk about this. Here we go. There we go. That cover is sexy right there. Obviously, the second edition came out in 2021, so first edition, they're virtually the same. But Great Western Trail, Alexander Pfister kind of put his name on the map for me. That since then, he's a designer I always look towards for game design. He made Blackout Hong Kong and Maracaibo, which was awesome. And then there was also Great Western Trail Argentina, which I have that one also. But anyway, this is a Rondel style game of moving a worker and your kind of deck building and hand management to sell cattle. It's a theme that I thought would have never worked, but this game is, I have it as a 10 out of 10. It's a masterpiece. I recently played this not too long ago. I have the second edition. I have the second edition expansion, Rails to the North as well. I have Argentina, and I will get New Zealand. So that's going to be exciting. But yeah, no surprise that this one was my number 5 of the year. My number 4, this is actually interesting because I have Mansions of Madness second edition, and I don't have any other second editions. I guess I must have back then not cared about doing a remake essentially on here. But I mean, to be fair, second edition is radically different from first edition, so maybe that's why I considered it. This got a bunch of content from Fantasy Flight back then. Tons of expansions, big box expansions. I think there's like 25 plus scenarios you can play. Back then, the app integration was just done so well. It like completely removed because first edition was a one versus many, which was great in its own right, but making this fully cooperative. Still one of my favorite cooperative games to play. It just oozes with theme, and the scenarios with the multiple different endings just is done awesome. I have everything for this game. The only thing that bums me out is I have the wooden chest that does not fit the that does not fit the newest expansion, so that makes me very, very sad. In terms of it, like, not being a 10, it's because of this shit right here. Like, God, these minis suck. The bases suck, the minis suck. It's just an eyesore on the table. It does not work well. I'd rather just I actually think last time I played this, I just pulled the tokens out and played it because it's full art on there. Just get like those standy clip things and just set those out. You're gonna have a better time because there's text and shit on the back anyway. So don't know what they were thinking. But at this point, I think it's safe to say 7 years later that they're done making content for it. I would not be surprised if they announced a third edition and integrated their like the app that they use on for Descent. Would not be surprised if they went that route. At least, if not a second edition or a third edition for this, they might do a second edition for Eldritch Horror. It's coming. You heard it here first. I'm predicting a third edition for Mansions of Madness or a second edition of Eldritch Horror. Anyway, that was my number 4 of 2016. My number 3, God, oh my God, this one just this is still getting content. I just got a new expansion for this one too. That is Aeon's End. Aeon's End is one of my absolute favorite deck builders, cooperative deck builders. I have everything for this game. The latest expansion was the Past and Future, which I haven't played yet. I really need to. But let's see their expansions. So they had the Depths, which was 2016, came out that year. Nameless, 2017. Then The Void, Outer Dark, all 2017. Because they've been going on Kickstarter for this for a while. And then the Return to Gravehold, Southern Village, these are all just different bosses. Not only are that, they have the Aeon's End Legacy, which is technically its own game, but that's all integrated into this. And then they did the Legacy of Gravehold, which was an even bigger legacy game that you can take all that stuff and throw it into regular Aeon's End. This game is insane, but one of the best tight, difficult, cooperative deck builders. I mean, I tout this as a boss battler. Like it 100% is, um, just because there's not like a board that you run around. You pick a nameless or a boss, and you fight it. It brings out minions. It does every nameless fights and plays different. They've only got more creative and crazier as years went on. Uh, and you have special powers. You're building up, trying to fight them. So it's awesome. And the fact that this game you do not shuffle your deck is completely innovative. Way back then, that was like completely unheard of. The best you could ask for is a deck builder that let you put a card in straight to your hand instead of. But yeah, like the way you seed your discard pile just for it to flip so you can hopefully have an awesome hand every now and then is great. So yeah, that was my number 3 of 2016. My number 2 of 2016 is Seath. Is Scythe. This one, I think, like back then, Scythe would have. Well, I don't know actually. Yeah, this might have hit my number 2 for 2016. Um, I mean, I have it as a 10 out of 10. I have everything for this game. They made quite a few expansions. Well, three. They had the uh, what was it called? They had the Invaders from Afar, which just added two new factions, but then they did the Wind's Gambit expansion, which added aircrafts, and I really liked the Wind's Gambit. I think it opened up the game a lot more to where you didn't have to always get the mech that let you move across rivers. You weren't landlocked. It actually allowed you to move out. And then the Rise of Fenris, which is their campaign expansion, which is just so fucking good. But Scythe, funny enough, you can see it over here, just got a sequel to it, but they're not even remotely in the same, like they're not the same game in any way. I mean, there's just something 3,900 pictures. There's just something about this game. The art is gorgeous. It oozes with theme that is like intriguing. The factions are unique. Love the way that the mechs work. I have the metal mechs for it as well. Love the combat. Just everything about this just works for me. And and yeah, I mean, it's my number 2 game. I'm just blown away, honestly, that this was 7 years ago. I did this I think I have my original run through on the channel for this run through and discussion for it. But I have the organization box for it, so that's nice. It's yeah, this is one that'll stay in my collection for forever. And last but not least, my number 1 game of 2016 is Arkham Horror LCG, if I can, living card game. The card game. The card game. Arkham Horror, the card game. But that took way too long for me to get. Honestly, at this point, let's bump that bad boy up to a 10. It's the number 1 customizable game. Huh. Wow. Wow. Arkham Horror, then Marvel, then Summoner Wars. Anyway, I have everything for this game as well. This is actually one of the few games that I have blinged up a little bit. They had this thing on Etsy. I know people do coin capsules and stuff for like the tokens, but someone made like these beads. Like it's like metal on the bottom, but it has like the icon of the um cardboard tokens with like a little bead over it. So and then that I bought a separate bag for it, so it just feels really good to draw those out of the bag. My storage solution for this is insane, but works. I have every single card sleeved. A subscription for it that allows me to slightly have it organized. Someone also on Etsy has dividers that make setting up the game slightly better. But I mean, let's take a good old look at these expansions. they're still coming out with expansions too. These came out in 2023. Then we had 2022. I mean, there's 10 pages of expansions. But at the same time, and they've actually done way better. They used to release a little box set for like the new arc, and it had like 3 scenarios, and then they would release booster packs, 5 of those, I think. Yeah, so you had like an 8 scenario arc. Uh, but they've since done away with that because that was atrocious, and now you buy 2 boxes. You get the hero box, and then you get the actual scenario box. So like when we look at the expansions for like the Circle Undone, the Investigator expansion, and the Campaign expansion. So it's technically it's like $80 each, but you get it all in one, and that is way, way better. Like leagues better than the individual box. So yeah, I mean, this is my favorite Arkham Horror game. It beats out Arkham Horror Second Edition. It beats out Eldritch Horror. The scenarios for this are incredibly creative. The customization for your investigators are awesome, and this is kind of deck construction. Um, and not kind of, it is deck construction, and the only deck construction game I own. So yeah, this one is fantastic. So, what was the point of all this? Was it for me to just talk about games? Well, kind of, but it was also a way for me to kind of look over the past few years, and by few years I mean 7 years of I believe I have a top 10 of 2016. If not, then I might I plan on kind of going back and doing a few years I missed, but looking over the past years of top 10s that I've done, look at the 5 top games, because to me those were the more important ones if you're thinking about all the games you play in a given year. And it's like, if I'm saying these are the 5 best, well, are they? Years later, in retrospect, how good were these games? And looking back, pretty damn good. Like, I'm actually very surprised that I own almost all of these games. So out of 7 years, so because 2022, 1, 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, yes, 7 years, 5 games. Um, you have 35 total games that we just talked about. Out of those 35 games, I do not own anymore Bloodborne, Etherfields, On Mars, Pandemic Legacy Season 0, and that is it. If we're technically, I mean, I do have a copy of Pandemic Legacy Season 2, but it's still in shrink, and I'm not going to touch it for a long time. So let's just say, for shits, that I wouldn't own that one if I wasn't going to replay it. Out of the 35 games that I said were the best of that given year, I do not own 5 of them. That is amazing. And it's even more amazing that I still own all the games from 2016, 2017, and 2018. You know, the older years. That's amazing. And that's actually really good, because I don't like selling games that like are brand new, because where it's but if you don't touch them in a year, then it's like, I mean, I don't know. There's just maybe it's complete coincidence. Maybe 35 games isn't enough of a sample size to justify that, but those are the ones I picked, and I also didn't want to make this video like 4 hours long, because I was going to talk about all 10 and be quicker, but I knew I wasn't going to do that. So yeah, that's where I'm gonna leave that. There's kind of my thoughts on 35 games, and I hope this was fun for you. I hope this maybe is something to talk about. If you want to actually see me do this video again, but talk about the back 5, so 6 through 10, and see how many of those, I might just do that anyway. But if you're interested in that, then let me know also, because then I can take those, because that's still in the top 10 of the year, um, and compare that. Then that might be fun to do also. But yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. This was fun. So let me know what you think of all these games. I keep directing to the list that you can't see of all those games, all 35 of those games. Which ones of those were your favorite? Which ones of those do you completely disagree with me on? Let me all know all that in the comments below. Other than that, like, comment, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful whatever time of day it is for you.
Hey everyone, thank you for watching, and I really hope that you enjoyed the video. If you would like to see more of my content, go ahead and click that subscribe button and the bell to be notified whenever I upload any new content. If you feel like supporting the channel, you can go ahead and click that Patreon link to be taken to my Patreon, and any help is truly appreciated. Other than that, stick around for any other run-throughs or reviews or cool top 10s or whatever I feel like putting on. Other than that, like, comment, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful whatever time of day it is for you.